every moment I was sure I wouldn't make it through. I was saved because of you. I don't know how, but you take all my pain and you turn it into something.
Welcome back to the Behind Closed Doors podcast, where we talk about real women, real struggles, and real faith. Guys, we are on season 2. I never even thought we would make it through season 1, but we did. And even though it's been a while, we're back and we're ready and we're here for you. This season, we're going to be talking about many different topics. We are going to be talking to many different people. Our goal is to have special guests on the podcast. And speaking of special guests, we were able to interview a very, very incredible one last November, and that person is Dr. Sharon Carnes. I'll tell you a little bit about the podcast interview, but let me tell you about some of her accolades. She has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Bowling Green State University in political science, sociology, and English. She spent a considerable study on governments and politics of the Middle East. She did 1 year of coursework from Bowling Green State University and a Bachelor of Theology degree from Mount Vernon Bible College, now Life Pacific University. She has a Master of Ministry degree from International Seminary. She has a Doctor of Religious Education from International Seminary, and she has a Doctor of Divinity from International Seminary. She's conducted study tours in Israel for 34 years, and she has studied and visited the nations of Egypt and Jordan several times. She's been a part of our church for 53 years and a part-time staff for 4 years and full-time pastoral staff for over 35 and a half years. So Dr. Sharon Carnes knows exactly what she's talking about. In this episode that we have with her, we talk about Israel, we talk about the war that's going on, we talk about Hamas, we talk about the Palestinians. She shares her beliefs, she shares what she feels that's going on, but my most favorite part of this interview is she talks about where we stand according to biblical times. How far are we in the Bible? She gives us a little insight how we are living in Ezekiel and that we are about to hit chapter 38. You're not gonna wanna miss this episode. It is so fantastic. So let's get into it. So in talking about Israel and Hamas and the war, everything that has started, can you take us to the root of why all of this is happening or why Israel has gone into war?
Well, obviously, usually, if you will look at all of the wars that Israel has had to fight for that little sliver of land in the Middle East, in almost every case, it's Israel that's been attacked. And that goes all the way back to actually in 1920. In 1917, during World War II, many of the Jews fought on behalf of the Allied parties. And a unique thing happened that actually brought about the Balfour Declaration and then the League of Nations actually allowing for a Jewish homeland. The Allies were losing the war, and they were running out of gunpowder, could not procure gunpowder. And what happened was a Jewish chemist came up with a plan to make synthetic acetone. It actually was the reason why they were able to win the war. When they asked him, "What can we give you? You've really saved us." He said, "The only thing I ask is a homeland for my people in the Holy Land." That led to the League of Nations giving them land. And I will tell you that that land, as you look on the map, included all of what is now Israel, part of the Sinai, all of the land that we now know as Jordan, and a part of the southern part of Lebanon. And of course, they were overjoyed to get that. Unfortunately, they're also a people who are used to broken promises. By 1922, Britain had given 77% of that land to what they then called Transjordan on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And they said that would be the land that would be set aside for Arab Palestinians. And so Israel was left with this little sliver of land on the west side of the Jordan River. And it's just, that's been the case over and over and over and over again, but they were willing to take that. What's interesting is that the Arabs were allowed to settle both on the west side of the Jordan River and on what had been given for a Jewish homeland on the west side of the Jordan River as well. But Jews were only allowed to settle on the west side of the Jordan River. So it started being unfair from the very beginning. So then they decided that they would have to have somebody who would oversee that land on the west side. So they went to Iraq, got a family, the Hashemites, to come and basically be place setters in the land of Transjordan while they developed that for a homeland for Arab Palestinians who really weren't Palestinians to begin with, because the name Palestine actually was laid on that area by the Romans during the Roman occupation of what we know as the Holy Land. And they call it Palestina from the term Philistine, which was Israel's arch enemy. So they were insulting them by calling them by the name of their enemies. So what happened is, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, once the Hashemites began ruling and reigning as a place setter, they decided they didn't want to be place setters anymore. So they declared the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And eventually, if you fast forward to 1948, and I know we're passing a great deal of history, but in 1948, the United Nations, knowing because people had nowhere to go, survivors of the Holocaust had nowhere to go. And so the desire then was to move back to their ancestral homeland. And so the United Nations voted again for the partition of this little area now, because the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan now was the Hashemite kingdom and not the Arab Palestinian state anymore. But they voted, they said, we'll take anything, we'll take a postage stamp, we have nowhere else to go. The United Nations passed that, and in 1948, they declared the Free State of Israel. They asked Arabs staying in the land, living there, stay, help us build a new nation. And they would have gotten citizenship, freedom, but the Arab nations surrounding Israel said to them, if you leave, you leave. And then when we drive Israel into the sea, you can come back and have your homes and theirs too. Well, as history will tell us, it didn't exactly end that way.
I didn't know they wanted them to stay.
They begged them to stay and together build this free state.
Oh, man.
And what happened was when they went to these other Arab nations, saying, well, you told us to leave, and now what are we going to do now? Rather than giving them citizenship in the countries to which they went, they kept them in refugee camps, called them Palestinians, used them as pawns in world publicity, and that is the case today. There are still refugee camps where now you have third generation living in refugee camps, all because they told them to leave and we'll drive them into the sea. And they're still there, and that's what's creating a great deal of the tension now.